So we want to first ask you, how do you feel about this and how are you dealing with this as a person?
Angry, frustrated, confused, but understanding that this is just mirroring the issues that we have in the Black community.
As Sacramento's community advocate, as the partner with the family helping to get their word out, what does the family want us to know about this?
I believe that their brother was a good person and didn't deserve it. That these officers should be held to the highest degree of law and consequences. They want to see a conviction. They don't want to see nothing more, nothing less than that. But simply, I believe they want their brother back. I think the family hates to have to go through this process. They hate to be a part of this unfortunate fraternity, you know, of families that are left to fight, families that are left to grieve, families that are left with memories of their loved one and have to be a part of the unfortunate police brutality syndicate.
The family is calling for peace. What do you believe will be the reaction across the country and in Sacramento to this video?
I think it'll be mixed. All families are doing the right thing to cause for peace, but you also have to look at, from an individual standpoint, there's a lot of people right now, currently, just here in Sacramento, that haven't got any bit of comfort or resolve in their issues. So when you look at what's happening for the family right now in Memphis, they're able to see a firing that you often don't see that fast. They have been able to see charges, which you often don't see that fast. And there are some moments where the things that would galvanize us to take the streets because we would be asking for these demands have already been done. So I think that the level of it will kind of be different, but in the same resolve, there probably will be a level of solidarity. But I honestly think, and just wholeheartedly, just to be transparent, 5 Black police officers killing a Black man is different than 5 white police officers killing a Black man. I don't know why we don't have that same kind of energy, but it's just totally different. You know, we look at more or less a systematic problem. It's never been, for a lot of us who do the work, it's never been about individuals, it's never been about race, it's just been about systematic issues. And the corruption of policing is in full display, not only for the simple fact that these 5 Black officers were able to do this, but how these 5 Black officers got consequences that we've never seen for white officers in the same kind of moment.
Let's talk about that. Do you think this happened so quickly and has so much attention because these 5 officers are Black?
Yeah, they're expendable. They have now truly realized that they don't bleed blue, they are Black. They are African Americans. And laws and regulations in any system that we are placed in is different. So in terms of us looking at this, I'm keeping it simple. Keep that same energy. The same energy and the swiftness of action to fire, and also relieve them of their duties without pay. We want to see that with other officers that are white when this thing happens. Because for too long we've watched Mike Brown, Eric Gardner, Freddie Gray, George Floyd, Stephon Clark, so many others that I could name, that we did not see this kind of energy, this kind of swift attack on showing the world that, you know, we can hold our law enforcement accountable. And that's all we've ever asked for. So now we're saying, moving forward, since you've allowed us to see, wait a minute, you could have done this the whole time. We know that this moment will happen again. How will other law enforcement agencies respond throughout the country in this moment?
And when it does happen again, there are calls to make this the new blueprint, is the term being used. What are your thoughts on that? Is that realistic?
I mean, it should have been in the first place. I always thought it was crazy that when you're watching someone take their last breath and literally be murdered by law enforcement, the public folks that we pay with our tax dollars, that they were paid leave, and there was this ongoing year evaluation and investigation on what we saw, which was, a lot of us believe, was murder. And then most of the times when it went into a court of law, a lot of them didn't get convicted. This is now the time in the moment that you're showing us, even though it's 5 Black officers, so we're very aware why this is happening. A lot of us in the public are. We want to say, okay, good, kudos. Black chief, perfect. Let's see this go across the line. We want to see the same kind of action happen throughout every single law enforcement agency, as well as continue to break down the barriers of not necessarily dismantling, but orchestrating new reform in the police union, as well as the police bill of rights, and asking for more federal laws to be in place so we can make sure that this never happens again. That no officer believes that taking a black man's life due to a simple traffic violation ever happens again.
In Sacramento, we have our first black sheriff. Do you think there will be change from this because he is a Sacramento native, Tyre?
We're having more difficulties with Sac Sheriff than any law enforcement agency right now currently. There's a few moments that we've had here in the city last year as well as this year that haven't been resolved. I just don't believe in that notion of putting a black face in a position of power that it changes anything. Let's be very clear. We've had black DAs, we have black AGs, we've had black police chiefs all across the board in different countries in law enforcement, and we've come up with the same thing up until now. Now it's a little bit different, but again, expendable. Those 5 black officers are not as valued as it would have been for 5 white officers. And unfortunately, from my community, I don't believe that we hold ourselves accountable for the own crimes we commit on ourselves. It almost gives these guys a pass or makes them feel, well, hey, we do it every day in our community. I can kill this brother and get away with it.
And you use the term self-genocide. Can you expand on that?
In true transparency, I've never been one just to point the finger. I know the essence of some of our own resolve is, white supremacy. But when we become our own supremacists, when we become our own predators, we become our own gangs that destroy our communities and kill ourselves, we have to take a look at ourselves as what we're displaying as black culture. Black culture has been displayed with a lot of trauma and death of our own. So when you see these officers mimic this kind of genocide that we see all the time in our community, it's not surprising that it was 5 black officers, in my eyes, that actually did this. Because we've looked at a lot of cases that there have been 5 black officers. When we look at the case of Freddie Gray, when he passed away and was beat to death inside of that van, it was white officers, but as well it was black officers. So the corruption and I think the negligence some of us have to believe that when we have black officers creating this diversity in law enforcement, that things would change, it really hasn't. And the self-genocide is continued, and we're seeing it in full display. Unfortunately, this young man had to die for it.
Let's talk about the video. Should we, as news media, put it out there for everyone to have access to? And as a representative of the family, is that what the family wants?
I hate that you guys are going to do it, but you guys are going to do it. I mean, this is what you guys like to do, sensationalize things. Folks want the fire to start. I mean, I just was recently trying to get a 16-year-old black girl to get some pub, and nobody wanted to take this story. But as soon as a black man was killed by officers, everybody was shaking the trees down to get a story and talk to the family. So we understand the difference of what is sensationalized, what galvanizes emotions. It's murder, and usually it's murder of black people. And, for me, it's going to be difficult for me to kind of like watch a video like that. I never even really fully watched the George Floyd video up until more recently, just because I felt like it was time just to really analyze what was going on. But I'm just tired of watching Black death. I see it in the communities that I work in. I deal with it on an everyday basis, dealing with mothers and fathers and family members and friends that lose loved ones outside of it being police brutality, and I'm tired of it happening with police brutality. I don't need to keep on re-traumatizing myself. And I feel that, unfortunately, a lot of us in our community, the black community, we deal with trauma over and over again. So it desensitizes us. So will this galvanize folks to hit the streets? Probably so. But I think that because it's 5 black police officers compared to 5 white police officers, the energy will be less then. And then as well as some folks will point to the fingers like, hey, they're doing their job. They're fired, they're getting charges, everything is done here. We don't need to go out there and speak truth to power. But I believe we do need to take the streets. Why? Because the system hasn't changed. And until the system changes, that creates the idea for families to know that whenever something happens, there is going to be swift justice all the time. And for folks that put on a badge, that they will honor that badge and truly protect and serve, not hunt and kill anyone, whether it's black or white. I think that until we recognize the systematic issues of what we're dealing with and what we're facing in not only our communities, but in law enforcement, we're going to continue to be here over and over again.
Are you going to watch the video?
Probably not. Probably not. I think that I want to protect my energy at this moment in time. I mean, from what the family has told me, it's heinous. It's something probably unwatchable. And I have more important things to do in the community to heal, to begin to have these conversations with folks in power positions to change than continue to traumatize myself over and over and over again. So I probably won't watch the video at this particular time.
How important is video? You mentioned Rodney King, that's almost the first example we have of it. But body camera, it's fairly new. When we talked with Han, he said when he started on patrol, he didn't have one. It's completely different. It's beyond anything law enforcement imagined.
Yeah. Well, it's a game changer, but it's only a game changer if we have more convictions. I mean, remember, myself and others forced Sacramento during the 2014 time to get body cameras. I mean, this was something unheard of at that moment, but myself and other organizations really pushed hard and heavy to make sure that we had body cameras here in Sacramento. And up until now, the Sac Sheriff have body cameras because they didn't have body cameras up until a year ago. But I've watched body cameras being used and still have no convictions, right? So what's it worth if you have body cameras and you still are not getting the end result that you're wanting? One, we're not getting officers from taking a step back and reevaluating what they're about to do. Just because you're on body camera doesn't mean that the behavior stops. Secondly, we want to make sure when the body camera is showing us this negative behavior from law enforcement, that there's true convictions and then there's true consequences. Not that here we see a body camera, everyone gets traumatized, and the officers go back on the beat. That just to me is ridiculous.
The chants at the press conference today were call out the culture. What does that look like to you here in Sacramento?
I mean, we have a lot of work to do here in Sacramento. I think that, I see Sac PD trying to make a move for better. There's definitely still more work for them. Sac Sheriff, I mean, even though we have a new person at the head, there's a lot more work, it seems to be, for them. Just in our own local community, there's a lot. And it's not only law enforcement. It's also our communities that we work in and the communities that we live in. The whole culture needs to be changed. There needs to be a shift altogether, because I don't think and I don't believe that you can just depend on a culture changing with law enforcement if a culture is not changing within our community and within ourselves. So I just don't place blame on just law enforcement or what they're doing. I'm also looking at my community overall. How are we responding to things? How are we supporting things? And how are we creating other mechanisms for us to show a healthier culture? Not a culture of drama, not a culture of death, not a culture that celebrates murder and invites that to us, but simply this young man shouldn't have died. And the simple fact that we're having these conversations again lets me know we're so far away from where we thought some of these symbolic gestures of progress when it came down to George Floyd, when everybody was celebrating convictions and things of that nature with one of the officers, that we're still so far away from exactly what change looks like.
To play devil's advocate here, there are two sides to every story. You and I and most people won't know what it's like to patrol, to be in law enforcement, to make that split-second decision to protect your own life, to go home to your own family. How do we as a community build back that trust in relationship with law enforcement?
I think law enforcement hides behind the badge and this idea of we want to make it home. Well, we want to make it home as well. There was nothing that Tyre did wrong. This was a simple traffic stop. The way he was beaten down, you would have thought he owed somebody money. You'd have thought he was dating somebody's girlfriend. You would have thought that he did something to someone's family member. What was the reasoning? There was no reasoning. So when we look at the devil's advocate part about, what law enforcement face, you make a conscious decision to put on that badge and say, I want to be a change maker in my community. You said, I want to work as a law enforcement officer. I ain't never said I wanted to be black, I just came black. So we got to get away from this idea and this thought process that we know law enforcement's on the line. I mean, I commend them for a lot of the jobs. I know how dangerous it is, but that's another reason why in that idea of defund the police, and let me be very clear when I say this, because I don't want anyone to throw away, you see, he's talking about defunding the police. The reason why most of us advocated for that, and we might have used the phrase of defund the police might be wrong, but our intentions was the stress level, and I've always said this, the stress level of law enforcement going to rape scenes, murder scenes, having to get a dog out of the tree, whatever law enforcement has faced with the trauma that they deal with, we understand, we get it. We're saying allocate some of those funds to other spaces and places that can do that kind of work, that can do a mental health call and not feel that they have to pull out their gun and kill a man right in front of his home, in front of his wife. These are the kind of things that we were saying when we were trying to create the message of defund the police. The definition was not listened to, it was just the wording. And I think that becomes the problem. We're not saying that police don't have a hard task to do, but remember, they asked for this job. I never asked to be black, I just was. And when you see this kind of behavior, the only reason why this behavior continues to happen is because it's condoned in the system and they're protected by systematic issues, and they're protected by culture. So that becomes the fall line when we look at this moving forward. You have to change culture in every way.